from your 24-hour news source. This is live coverage of the Cristhian Bahena Rivera murder trial. Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
That's right, you're fine. Good morning, everyone. We are back on the record this morning. We're in the presence of the jury. The defendant, Mr. Bahena, is present along with the attorneys of record. Ma'am, I just want to remind you, you are still under oath. And with that, then, Ms. Fries, you may continue with your cross-examination of this witness.
Ma'am, in preparing for this trial, what did you review?
The transcripts.
All right. Have you also reviewed the videotape of the interview?
The car interview, yes.
And there's also a videotape of the interrogation, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Have you reviewed that?
I did not this time.
All right. Have you reviewed that before?
Yes.
Did you review that in preparation for other hearings?
Yes.
It's a long interview, is that right?
Yes.
Explain to me the video system from your understanding at the Poweshiek County Courthouse, or excuse me, the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office.
What exactly will you like me to explain? I mean, I knew the interview was being recorded, but I'm not sure how the system works itself.
Well, there's a room that you and my client were in, is that right?
Yes.
And there was clearly shown a video recording device, is that correct?
I did not pay attention to the video recording device.
But there was a video recording device in the room, is that right?
I am guessing that because I was told that the interview was being recorded, but I wasn't able to locate the video recording device in the room.
And when you left the video room, where did you go to speak with other officers and agents?
It was another room inside the Poweshiek Sheriff's Office.
Was there a way to view the interview room with you and my client?
No.
They weren't able to watch the video of the interview that you conducted?
I am not sure if they were able to see it. When I took my breaks and went out to talk to them, I did not see any video.
All right. In any event, you've watched the videotape, is that right?
Afterwards, yes.
And in fact, you had some, I guess, well, let me back up. When you watched it, did you compare the translations with the transcripts?
I tried to.
It's a difficult process, correct?
It is.
I have some difficulty as I don't speak Spanish.
Yes.
I would assume that even though you speak Spanish and you speak English, that it's still difficult to follow along.
Yes.
But from what you remember from the interview itself, do you believe that the videotape is a fair and accurate depiction of your interview process with my client?
Yes.
And even when you left the room and came back, do you think it was a fair and accurate depiction of what was going on?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, and I'm going to back up, it's divided up into 7 different parts. Is that correct?
I'm not sure how many parts.
There's several different parts that it's divided up into. Is that correct?
I know that it was divided into parts because, again, I review it afterwards, but I was not counting the parts.
All right. And you believe that that's a fair and accurate depiction of what happened that night. Is that right?
That is right.
Your Honor, at this time, I would move to publish Part 3, the third interview. It is time-stamped for the prosecutors, reference 20-27-35. And I intend, because it's over an 11-hour interview, I intend to only publish a portion of this interview. That's from 27:26 to 57:07. I intend to play this on fast forward as it shows a portion where we believe my client is sleeping.
All right, Mr. Brown, let me hear from the state.
Judge, my understanding from discussions with Ms. Fries is that this portion of the interview contains no discussion, there's nobody speaking. It shows the defendant only. Assuming that that's the case, I don't know that it's necessary to play 30 minutes or whatever it is. I know she's going to play it on fast forward. We would agree that he appears to be sitting in the interview, or I'm sorry, in the room. But if that's what it is, we don't really have any objection to it, but I just want to confirm that.
Ms. Freeze, is Mr. Brown's understanding correct?
There is a portion where Ms. Romero is in the room for a very short time, and then she leaves the room.
With that, then, permission granted to publish. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just for the record, I'm having a little trouble getting to the exact point, so I'm starting at 27:23. And for the record, I'm playing at 3 times the normal amount of time. Thank you. Sorry. 7:06.
Record will so reflect.
Now, ma'am, we just played about a half an hour of a video, is that right?
Yes,
It was played a little bit quicker, as it was played in fast forward, is that right?
yes,
Now, when you came back into the room, you saw that Mr. Bahena was sleeping, isn't that right?
I was carrying the food, so I was looking down and I placed the plate. So when I turned up, I saw him the way that he looks in the video, up and sitting forward a little bit.
So you're telling this jury that you did not see him sleeping?
Again, I do not recall seeing him with his head down. I was carrying the food. I was making sure the sandwich was not falling off the plate. I put the plate down with the drink, and then when I looked up, when I noticed Mr. Rivera, he was looking up the way that it is in the video.
Well, there's a transcript of what you two talked about, isn't that right?
That is correct, yes.
And that transcript would be a fair and accurate depiction of what you said to Mr. Bahena, isn't that right?
Again, yes.
Taking into different, I guess, different ways that Spanish people speak, is that correct?
That is correct.
Is there any other way that one would say, you fell asleep?
What do you mean by that?
Is there any other
different
way that one would say you fell asleep in Spanish?
Yeah.
All right, well, what I'm going to do, ma'am, is may I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Go ahead and take a chance to review this. I've underlined the portions, and let me know when you're done, and I'll take it back from you.
Okay.
Thank you. Ma'am, isn't it true that as you walked inside the room, you said you fell asleep?
Yes.
You also said I was able to get you something. Is that right?
Yes.
And specifically, that was because you two were talking about food and him being hungry. Isn't that correct?
I do not recall that.
Okay. And you acknowledged to them that it wasn't very big. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, the time on this video, the transcript is 20:27:35. So that's military time. Is that correct?
Yes.
What time would that be in Central Standard Time?
8:27.
Now, the interview that we watched was from 27 minutes approximately to 57 minutes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So if my memory serves me correct, or if my math serves me correct, I think that would be about 9 o'clock at night, correct?
Correct.
Now, my client, you already talked about, he worked a full day at work. Is that right?
Yes.
He told you that he worked from 5 a.m. until the law enforcement officers came and spoke with him. Is that right?
That is correct.
Do you know of any meals that he was fed between arriving at the law enforcement center and you giving him that sandwich?
No.
Did you ask him when he last ate?
No.
It would be fair to say that the last time he probably had a break, either from being at work or being interviewed, would be at lunchtime. Isn't that right?
It will be fair to say that.
All right. Now, so it was certainly past his dinner time at 9 o'clock.
Yes.
It probably was about the time that this man would be going to sleep. Isn't that correct?
Objections, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Now, ma'am, the next thing that you do, and I'm going to take a second to look in the video, but you give him some time so that he can eat his sandwich. Is that right?
Approximately 23, 25 minutes, yes.
You also give him some time so that he can drink his soda. Is that right?
That is correct.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this point in time, I would move to play 5939 to 122:00 on the video. And I do intend to play that at real time and also not in fast forward. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, any concerns?
We have the same concern that we had before. Also, is this an exhibit? Is there a letter attached to this?
Did I not give you a letter?
I don't recall one.
I don't have one.
Defendant's Exhibit D.
And just for the record, are both videos Exhibit D?
Yes, and I'll make record of when I'm playing them.
Okay.
Permission granted to publish this portion of D.
I'd also move to admit. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
No objection.
Defendant's Exhibit D is admitted at this time.
Can 2209. Now, ma'am, you can see during this period that my client is trying to use his phone. Is that right?
Yes.
It doesn't appear that he's able to talk with anyone on the phone, correct?
Correct.
He doesn't appear to have his phone up to his ear talking to anybody.
No.
Did you ever talk to him to make sure that he was able to reach anyone?
No.
At about the same time, his family arrives at the sheriff's office. Isn't that correct?
I do not recall the exact time again.
Okay, what time approximately do you recall them getting there?
I do not remember. Sorry.
So if a family member were to testify, hey, I remember getting here at this time, their recollection would be better than yours. Is that what you're saying?
Probably.
But in any event, when they arrived, Cristhian was in the same building, correct?
Yes.
In fact, the way the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office is set up is that there is a waiting room / lobby. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not familiar with the setup of the sheriff's office. The family members were out in the lobby.
All right, and the place where my client was being held was not far inside of the hallway. Is that correct?
Right.
It's all on one floor, correct?
Yes.
Not a huge building.
Again, not sure how big it was.
So it wouldn't have been difficult to make arrangements to allow them to meet with Cristhian. Is that correct?
Again, that was not my decision, and I was not aware of it.
All right, you didn't ask the permission to allow the family members to speak with my client.
I was advised that the family member was waiting outside, and actually they were not even inside the lobby because it was after hours, so they were waiting out in the waiting area, which I went out and greet them.
And you told them to go home.
I remember telling them that I was not sure at the times that we were going to go ahead and be there, that if they wanted to go rest, that was just a suggestion that I was making.
Do you recall, and it was right around this time, that you had a conversation with my client where he asked if he was going to sleep there?
I do not recall that.
If I showed you a transcript, would you be able to recall?
Yep.
May I approach?
You may.
And ma'am, just to orient you, I know this is a long transcript. Before we were looking at page 21 when I refreshed your recollection. So here, I'm just changing to 22. Go ahead and read that and let me know when you've had a chance to.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Isn't it true that my client asked you, I'm going to sleep here, ? So I could start making myself comfortable in here?
Yes.
And you tell him, no, for right now, just eat, okay?
Yes. Again, after that, there was a chuckle with both of us. I was understanding if he was asking me if he could get comfortable. I said, no, don't get too comfortable. I'm gonna be right back.
Well, you acknowledge that my client indicated that he was very tired.
No. As you can see at the beginning of the videos, the client, Mr. Rivera was very active with me when I had contact with him at all time. I do not recall, and I do not remember at any time Mr. Rivera leaning backwards in the chair when I was talking to him. All the time, as it was seen in the video, he was leaning forward. He was engaged in my conversation. He even was leaning towards the table towards me. That is the understanding. So yes, he was tired. Everybody was tired, but I was not able to see that he was really, really tired.
Well, you would acknowledge to me, ma'am, and the first time I approached you with the transcript on page 1, or excuse me, page 21, you told him as you walked in, you said you fell asleep, correct?
Yes, that was the question that I made.
And when we watched the video, Mr. Bahena was asleep.
He could have been asleep. He could have been with his eyes closed. I wasn't in the room.
Well, he appeared to be sleeping on the video, isn't that right?
He, to me, appeared to be resting, leaning against the chair to the back of the room, yes.
And then just a bit later, he asked you, and you're telling us that it's a joke if he was going to sleep there. Is that
I'm
right?
not saying that it was a joke. I'm telling you that we were both chuckling. We were both laughing about it. That is what I'm telling you.
Now, at a later time, you and another male came in and you questioned my client. Isn't that right?
I will have to look at the transcripts again.
All right, thank you. What I'm going to do is, if I bring up the video, it'll just show it to her, right? I want to refresh her recollection. Thank you. Ma'am, I just showed you a video, and that's at about 1:27:40.
Let me stop you. She was not able to see it.
Oh, okay.
Now we're good. In terms of showing it her again.
Were you able to see the video at that time?
Yes.
And does that refresh your recollection of what happened next during this 11-hour interview?
Yes.
It appears that you and another male are walking into the room. Is that right?
That is Sergeant Jeff Fink, yes.
And Jeff Fink, is he your supervisor?
He was my sergeant at the time that I was working with Iowa City Police Department.
Jeff Fink is also fluent in Spanish. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not sure if he is fluent. I had a few conversations with him in Spanish. I believe that at one point he told me that he taught Spanish, but cannot say that he was fluent.
Do you remember Sergeant Fink asking Cristhian how he was doing?
Yes, Sergeant Fink was doing part of the interview too.
And do you remember at this time my client replying that he was sleepy?
Yes.
Thank you. And it seemed that my client understood that there was another person that was coming in to interrogate him. Is that correct?
No, I'm not that I remember.
Well,
that's not what I understood from him.
At this point in time, you were interrogating my client. Isn't that correct?
I was conducting the interview.
All right, and Officer Fink, he was also interrogating my client. Isn't that correct?
We were both conducting the interview because that's how we started. As you are able to see in the transcripts and video, they were sometimes that I was just by myself in there with Mr. Rivera.
You have specialized training and experience in interviewing. Isn't that correct?
16 hours of training. Not sure if you call it specialized, but 16 hours of training, yes.
You also went to the police academy. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Describe that program.
It is 19 weeks of training just with police, law enforcement academy in general. So it goes between class sections, physical, a lot of physical more than class sections.
At that time, you were taught the difference between an interview and an interrogation, isn't that right?
At one point, yes.
An interview is when you talk with a witness, correct?
Yes.
An interrogation is when you confront a suspect, isn't that correct?
Yes.
This was an interrogation.
At that time, I did not know that Mr. Rivera was a suspect.
Well, you were confronting him that he was a liar at that time, isn't that right?
I do not recall calling Mr. Rivera a liar at any time. I was showing pictures to Mr. Rivera. I was showing him pictures of the vehicle, which he said first at the beginning of the interview he denied, and being aware of Mollie's disappearance, and then later he told me that that was his vehicle in the area where she was last spotted. That is how we started the conversation.
Well, right at this same moment that we're talking about, do you recall Officer Fink indicating that my client was not telling the truth?
I do not recall that.
Do you recall Officer Fink saying the evidence doesn't lie?
Again, do not recall that. I have to look at the transcript.
Do you recall Officer Fink confronting my client saying, Cristhian, you are not telling us the truth?
Again, that Sergeant Fink, I do not recall what he was saying. As you can see in the video, I was focusing on another item that I had in my hand.
May I approach?
You may.
Just right down here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Now, isn't it true that Officer Fink said, but the evidence doesn't lie?
Yes.
He also said, as we know, Cristhian, you are not telling us the truth.
Yes.
And that was an interrogation technique that was used repeatedly with my client over the course of this 11 hours. Isn't that right?
Again, interrogation. I will call it interview.
You told him that you found hair in his vehicle. Isn't that right?
Yes.
You also told him that you had his cell phone records. Is that right?
Yes.
And you didn't have his cell phone records yet. Isn't that
And
correct?
that was information that was being provided
So you
from
were
other
told.
agents.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
Yeah, one at a time.
So you were told that you had cell phone records indicating that he was being there, or that he was in the area. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And you agree that you were interviewing a person on a homicide case, correct?
I was not aware that it was a homicide case at the moment.
You weren't aware that there was a missing girl that could be dead.
I was aware that there was a missing girl. I didn't know if she was dead.
You were aware that her name was Mollie Tibbetts. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
You were aware that she had been missing for over a month.
That is correct.
There were several times in the interview where you questioned my client saying, where's the body, correct?
I do not recall that.
You speculated that she was dead several different times.
I do not recall that.
Why would you tell my client that he's not telling the truth?
Again, at the beginning of the interview, he was stating that he was not aware of knowing her until we show him the pictures of the black Malibu that he admitted that it was his.
All right, ma'am, I'm going to direct your attention. I think that you can see it on the screen, perhaps not. Do you see anything on your screen, Ms. Moreira?
No.
It's up now.
All right, thank you. So now I've opened up the next video, which is at 22:09:04. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't see the time here.
If you look up on the top left side, you can see it.
Yes, now I can.
And the interview shows you and Officer Fink continually questioning my client. Is that correct?
Yes,
And you agree with me that that's a fair and accurate depiction of the interview. Is that right?
no, I do not agree with you.
Okay.
I mean, that is not the way, again, I conducted the majority of the interview ourselves, so we were not even at the right place. I mean, we were switching places.
And so are you claiming that the videotape of the interview is not accurate?
No, I'm not claiming that. I'm just claiming that your question, you stated that this is the way that it went. No, because there were different parts of the interview.
But as far as, and I've got up 22:09:04, and that corresponds with what time, Ms. Romero?
10:09?
And you would agree that this is a fair and accurate depiction of the beginning of the interview at 10:09 at night?
Yes.
And ma'am, to kind of acquaint you to where we're at, since the interview is brought up in front of you, there's a place where Mr. Rivera asked to use the bathroom about that time. Is that right?
Yes.
And it's clear that it's clear that there's that time on the interview because he leaves the room and goes to the bathroom. Is that correct?
Yes, if I do recall correctly, I did ask him another times if he wanted to use the bathroom or something.
Now, during this 11-hour interview, there was only one time that my client left this space. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was at the time that he said, hey, can I use the restroom? Is that correct?
That is correct.
So other than the time where he's leaving, he is in that interview room alone or being interviewed the entire time. Is that correct?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, I would offer, I'm at 48:24, and I plan to play to 104:12, and I plan to play on a fast forward. I would offer that into evidence and move to publish. Thank you.
Again, I'm gonna need help here. Is this D or is it not D?
This is Defendant's Exhibit D, and for the record, it's broken up into 7 different parts corresponding with the interview.
Well, my confusion is, have we already admitted this into evidence or not?
Yes.
Okay, then we don't need to re-offer it. So the question is, do permission to publish, correct?
I guess what and not to quibble, but I am only offering I think that there's an 11+ hour interview here, Your Honor, and I am not offering the entire video to go back to the jury. So I think that the interview is as to Defendant's Exhibit D, but the only portions that should be played for the jury are the specific time periods, which is why I'm making record on that.
Mr. Brown?
I'm confused. So the exhibit that, can we make a record on this outside the presence of the jury, please? Or do you want me to make it now? My explanation would be that Exhibit D that was offered, I was unaware there were 7 parts to it. I'm not sure that was mentioned before. We did not object, I think, to Exhibit D. I'm not clear on what Exhibit D completely is in its 7 parts, so I'm not sure where we're at here.
The interview that was produced by the state.
I understand that, and I'm not disputing that the video is portions of the police interaction with the defendant. What I'm confused by is what portions of the interview are part of Exhibit D that has already been admitted into evidence. If there were 7 parts of it, I thought there were 2, I guess, whenever I didn't object to it before. I'm not saying that we have an objection to all of it, I just don't know what it is.
All right, here's what we're gonna do. Let's take a 10-minute recess. Let me clear the hall. Members of the jury, want to remind you of your admonition. Leave your notebooks where they are. And then here's what I'm going to say regarding the exhibit. Again, what I want to say is that D has been admitted. I don't ever remember there being a reference to it being in 7 parts. Now, with that said, I think that the state is going to understand and know what those 7 parts are. I don't think there's going to be any surprises in that. But while we take the break, I want to make sure the state and the defense gets on the same page and make sure there's no problems with D, even though it's already been admitted. So I would ask you to work on that during our 10-minute recess. And with that, then, you are free to go, that is, members of the jury. Ms. Romero, you may step down. Mr. Bahena and the attorneys of record are present. Mr. Romero, I will remind you, you're still under oath, but before we get back to the questioning, Exhibit D. What do we want to say regarding D?
From your 24-hour news source, this is live coverage of the Cristhian Bahena Rivera murder trial. Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
That there's no discussion that will be published to the jury since it's in a foreign language in Spanish. So with that representation from the defense, if they want to play those 7 portions, we don't really have an objection to it. But it is my understanding that those 7 portions show similarly what we have already seen. Does that make sense?
It does. With that record then, permission to publish granted.
Thank you. For the record, I'm starting at 48:24. And I'm pausing here, Your Honor. For the record, this is at 3 times speed. Thank you. time stopping at 1:03:05.
Record will so reflect.
Ma'am, at this point in time, there are two men that enter the room, is that right?
Yes.
Who are those men?
Sergeant Fink from the Iowa City Police Department and the DCI agent.
And ma'am, I'm gonna take that off the screen. Was it your understanding that at that point in time, an immigration hold was put on my client?
11:30.
And in fact, when you came back, my client told you that he was under arrest for an immigration hold. Isn't that right?
I was made aware of the detainer. I do not recall him letting me know that.
Right, may I approach?
Yes.
It's all right.
There you go.
Thank you.
First time up. Ma'am, isn't it true that my client told you, and I believe tomorrow, an agent from immigration is going to come?
Yes.
He told you that he was under arrest, is that right?
He told me an agent from immigration was coming.
Now, my client's phone was taken away from him, is that right?
Yes.
He had no access, he was not free to go at that point in time, is that right?
Yes.
If he would have asked to leave, you wouldn't have let him.
He was under custody because of the ICE agent.
He wasn't told that his family was there asking about him, is that right?
I did mention to him that his family was out there.
And if he says that that is not the case, you disagree with that, is that right?
Again, the interview was recorded. I will have to review the transcripts again.
But it's what you recall is you think you told him his family was out there.
Yes, that is correct.
You never offered to let him see his family.
No, I did not.
Ma'am, there were 3 distinct times prior to this immigration hold being placed that you told my client that you were not from immigration. Isn't that right?
Yes.
The first time, and I'm looking at 17:04:34, so this would be the first interview at about 5 o'clock, you said to my client, okay, Cristhian, I'm going to ask you this, but first I'm going to tell you that we are not from immigration. Do you remember telling him that?
Yes, I do remember telling him that. I believe at one point Mr. Rivera mentioned, if I recall correctly, I asked him, do you know why you are here? And he goes, yes, it has to do something with immigration, correct? And that is why I was trying to make it clear to Mr. Rivera that I have nothing to do with immigration.
And you further reiterated that 2 more times, saying that he was not here for an immigration issue. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
You said again, Cristhian, I already told you, we aren't immigration, right?
Right, law enforcement, as far as I know, we're not part of immigration.
And then you said to again, you said, do you understand why I feel that you're keeping something from me? At this time, I'm telling you that I'm not immigration. I'm not here to judge you. You said
Again.
that to him also, isn't that right?
Yes.
And then a 4th time, while you were in the room with Officer Fink, he reiterated, we're not interested in your status or immigration. No, they want information about her. You recall that?
Yes, I do.
So they want information about what happened with Ms. Tibbetts. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Now, ma'am, you testified that you don't know anything about a false confession. Is that right?
Yes.
You don't know what the definition of a false confession is?
No, I do not.
You don't understand that concept whatsoever?
No, not at the moment, I do not.
Do you understand the position that sometimes people can say things that they don't really, that they didn't really do?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation. It's outside the purview of the expertise of this witness.
Sustained.
Ma'am, you would agree with me that my client was stuck in this room for approximately 11 hours, isn't that right?
I will agree with you. Yes, that was the approximate time of the interview.
The only food that he was given was that sandwich that this jury saw him get, isn't that right?
That is correct. I did offer Mr. Rivera something to eat. I myself have not had any lunch since 11 a.m. in the morning.
You, excuse me, he fell asleep multiple times during breaks of this interview, isn't that right?
According to the recording, yes. During my presence, no.
Now, there's other times during, and I'm happy to play them for you, ma'am, but basically anytime there was a break, he put his head down or leaned back and went to sleep, isn't that right?
That is what we are seeing in the recording, yes.
My client was aware that he could be deported back to Mexico, isn't that right?
I'm going to object. This calls for speculation as to what Cristhian Rivera thought.
Sustained.
Ma'am, you told my client multiple times that you were not from immigration, isn't that right?
Yes, I did.
And you told him that because he was an illegal immigrant, isn't that correct?
He explained his status at the beginning of the interview to me, yes.
And you understand that if someone is illegally in this country, that they can be deported, isn't that right?
Yes and no.
You don't understand what an ICE hold is, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
What's an ICE hold?
Judge, I'm going to object to relevance.
Overruled. Witness may answer if she knows.
ICE hold, it can be that, you have a retainer from ICE agent.
So it's something that someone that's alleged to be illegally in this country is held in custody, isn't that right?
Yes.
And it's your understanding an ICE hold was put on my client at 11:30 p.m. that night, isn't that right?
That is correct, 11:30.
Now, ma'am, you are aware of no statements whatsoever that my client tried to sexually assault Mollie Tibbetts, correct?
Correct.
He never indicated anything to the fact that he tried to sexually assault Mollie Tibbetts, is that right?
Correct.
There's no evidence that you're aware of that he attempted to sexually assault Mollie Tibbetts, is that right?
I'm going to object as calls for speculation on this witness's behalf.
Sustained.
You interviewed my client for 11 hours, correct?
Yes.
And during that time, you presented my client with different theories of what could have happened, is that right?
Yes.
And you were provided information from law enforcement about the evidence that they were gathering, is that right?
Yes.
The evidence that they were gathering from my client's vehicle was being gathered simultaneously to this interview, is that right?
Yes.
And there was no information that you were given that my client sexually assaulted Mollie Tibbetts, correct?
That is correct.
And he never made any statements that he did that, is that right?
The sexual reference that he made towards her was Mr. Rivera stated he found her attractive. I found her hot.
And if you find someone attractive, it's somewhat of a leap to say that you're going to sexually assault them, is that right?
Object calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Ma'am, in any event, you said that there was no information on this that you had that my client intended to sexually assault Mollie Tibbetts. Is that correct?
Objections now asked and answered.
Overruled. The witness may answer.
Go ahead.
Can you repeat the questions?
Carrie, would you mind reading that? Thank you. Ma'am, in any event, you said that there was no information on this that you had that my client intended to sexually assault Mollie Tibbetts. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Ma'am, how many interviews approximately, and I'm not going to hold you to it, but an estimate, did you do in your capacity as a law enforcement officer?
Approximately, I will say informal or formal.
Any type of interview?
In my law enforcement career, I will go ahead and say more than 20 times. I mean, all the times that we get to a call of service is an investigation and interview.
How many times have you had an interview that lasted 11 hours?
None.
How many times have you had an interview that lasted 10 plus hours?
None.
How many times have you had an interview that lasted 9 plus hours?
Zero.
I'm going to object to the form of the question. She's already answered that she's not been in a long interview. We don't have to count it down.
Sustained.
Well, let's start with this then. How many times have you been in an interview that lasted over an hour?
4 times.
How many times have you been in an interview that lasted over 2 hours?
Approximately 4 times.
How many times have you been in an interview that lasted over 3 hours?
Approximately 4 times.
All right, let me guess that all those times you were interviewing suspects.
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that when you are interviewing suspects that those interviews are longer?
Yes.
Because the first thing that you do is you rapport build, correct? You talk to the client, or
That
you
is
talk to the
correct.
suspect.
Yes.
And then you start to confront them with different pieces of evidence, is that right?
That is correct.
And here you confronted my client with different pictures of surveillance camera, is that right?
Correct.
You also confronted him that there was hair in the vehicle, is that correct?
Yes.
And you don't know whether or not that was a false statement, is that correct?
Correct.
That was just information that law enforcement was giving you to tell Mr. Rivera.
That is correct.
And you relied on that information that they were telling you the truth, right?
I was just relying on the information that they were giving me.
It's important for you to get a good confession, is that right?
That is the goal of the interview, to get the truth out of that.
You want the truth, not someone just to say what you want them to say, is that right?
We are looking for the truth.
Now, the blackout that was suggested here, that was your suggestion to Mr. Rivera, that he might have some sort of a condition. Isn't that right?
That is, I do not recall that. That is not correct.
So you don't believe that, is that right?
Correct.
All right. How many times, well, let me ask you this. Are you certified to be an interpreter?
No, I am not.
So like these two nice people right here that are interpreting for my client, Mr. Rivera, you understand they have special qualifications, correct?
I believe so.
And that's so that they can interpret a good record in court. Is that right?
Correct.
Do you have any sort of qualifications to interpret a statement?
No, I do not, other than the fact that I have been interpreting since I was 11 years old.
Did Mr. Rivera ever provide any information to you that he had been stalking Ms. Tibbetts?
No.
He said that he had driven by her 3 different times, is that right?
That is correct.
But he said that he had never met her, right?
Yes.
There was no information that you had that he had followed her around in the days or nights leading up to this, is that right?
Not prior to the date that I show him in the picture, no.
The information that you had was that he had driven by her 3 times, correct?
That is the information that Mr. Rivera provided, yes.
Then he had gotten out to talk to her, is that right?
At that particular point of the conversation, he did not agree to stop to talk to her.
Well, at a point at the end of the interview, when you were at the Cornfield, he said he got out to talk to her, is that right?
He said he parked his vehicle behind her. He started jogging after her, and that is when he made contact with her. Apparently, Mollie turns around, intends to call the police or intends to use the phone. Mr. Rivera stated she tried to call the police. That is when I got angry, and that is when we started fighting.
So at no point when he was driving around beforehand did he report that he was angry with her?
No.
At no point when he's getting out of his vehicle did he report that he was angry at her.
No.
At no point when he's walking up to her trying to say hello did he report that he was angry to her.
No, Mr. Rivera made it clear that he got, that the way that I understood it, got him angry when she intended to call the police.
So it was just a quick thing that made him angry is what he told you.
Objection to the form of the question calls for speculation as to what a quick thing is.
Sustained.
What is it that made him angry?
Mr. Rivera told me this is the way he put it. I was behind her. She noticed that I was behind her. She intended to use her cell phone. She stated that she was going to go ahead and call the police. That is when I got angry and we started fighting. That was his words.
So it was when she decided to call the police, is that correct?
That was my understanding.
This interview was 11 hours long, is that right?
Yes.
You said that you were very tired by the end of it.
We were all tired, yes.
The training that you have in interviewing is 16 hours total, is that right?
That is correct.
No further questions.
Mr. Brown, any redirect?
Judge, before I go ask questions on redirect, there is a record that we need to make concerning the scope of those questions I would like for you to hear. Can we take a break for me to make that record?
The answer is yes. Members of the jury will take a break at this time. We'll shoot for 10 to 15 minutes. Want to remind you of your admonition. And again, you can leave your notebooks where they are. Carry on. Yes, I'm going to go with them.
Judge, are we going to be back in chambers to do this, or are we going to do it here?
Clear.
I can move in a minute.
Where he pointed out where the edge of the corner. He was handcuffed at the time and indicated with Ms. Romero standing right next to him, where her body was located. So Ms. Romero can testify to that. The considerable amount of time cross-examining Pamela Romero over the defendant's sleep deprivation, the deportation detainer, all of that testimony, repeatedly asked her questions about it. It is our belief now that the statements of the defendant are now admissible as impeachment and rebuttal to any argument that the defense is setting up that because he was sleep deprived, he falsely confessed. There is no other reason that the defense offered that testimony than to argue later that the sleep deprivation evidence is that he falsely confessed. They have now pushed back in the statements that the court has excluded. We would ask to be allowed to inquire with Ms. Romero as to what those statements were, the directions the defendant gave them, the location of the body, and his mannerisms and pointing at the edge of the cornfield indicating where Mollie Tibbetts was located. We would ask, I'm doing this outside the presence of the jury because obviously there's a prior court order that suppresses that type of information, and but we believe now, based upon the cross-examination of the defendant, that the defense has made that relevant to impeach this notion that he was somehow sleep deprived and falsely confessed, any insinuation that he falsely confessed. So we would ask to be allowed to re-examine her on those questions that are currently suppressed, as I've outlined. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Defense?
Your Honor, I think that at this point, first, it's premature. There may be a point, and I don't think that we've reached it, that the court says, hey, you've opened the door and it should be allowed for impeachment. But for Mr. Brown to insinuate that we are not able to present a defense, for us to insinuate that for us to be limited insinuating that our client was not sleep deprived, when you saw in that video that he was sleeping throughout the breaks on the interview. Ms. Romero admitted that there were other points that he was sleeping during breaks. The coercive interrogation techniques that were used, the 11-hour time period that was used, are certainly things that the defense should be able to, and frankly, must be able to, in Mr. Bahena's right to submit a defense. The other thing is, I think that it's common sense that with Ms. Romero, her testimony, I think that it's common sense that someone who has been working all day and who has kept awake all night, that they would be tired, and that simply wasn't Ms. Romero's testimony. Here I'd point out too is that the statements that we asked for, there was no testimonial statements that were offered or introduced by my client during that period of suppression. I was very careful to make sure that the questions that I asked were in reference to questioning that happened outside of that period of suppression. So we don't agree with the state's position. Thank you.
We'll go ahead and take a recess, and before we bring the jury back in, I'll give you my thoughts. Thank you.
If I may just give you a case. Hang on just a second. The case I can find that's the closest on this is State versus Weaver, 608 Northwest 2nd, 797 at 806. It's a 2000 Iowa Supreme Court case. In that case, on the defendant's cross-examination of a Division of Criminal Investigation agent, an agent testified that he had analyzed no fingernail scrapings from the defendant Weaver, There was another officer's testimony that was offered to rebut that implication that the state had failed to preserve evidence. Although that situation is different, that is analogous to this particular situation in that we are not trying to limit their defense, but we are allowed to impeach it if they're going to offer it. They made that decision, not me. We specifically avoided these statements because of the court's prior order. And as I said before, we think now it's relevant as impeachment that he was somehow sleep deprived and falsely confessed. It directly contradicts that.
Take a brief break, and again, before we bring the jury back in, I'll give you my thoughts.
Your Honor, may I say one last thing?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd point out that we are not offering any evidence in this case. What the court has heard with Ms. Romero is merely cross-examination. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, we'll take your break. rule one way or the other on that because it's not been asked to at this point. There's not a pending motion.
Just to make sure, I just need to clarify my position. The defense, I believe, from sitting in here and listening to the cross-examination of the office, or of Ms. Romero, has offered repeatedly evidence that the defendant was sleep deprived. I can think of no other argument the defense would be making later in that he falsely confessed. That's what I believe they're going to argue. They've even used false confession twice with the witness in cross-examining her, once yesterday and once today. It's just just to make it clear, I respect your ruling. I'm not trying to argue with you, but I just want to make sure I want you to understand what our position is that we would be offering that statement that is currently suppressed as impeachment of that suggestion that he falsely confessed. That is clearly what they have done in the cross-examination of Pamela Romero. The state specifically avoided that type of information whenever we offered her direct testimony, and the defense has now introduced it on cross-examination. So I don't know if that further clarifies our position with you or not, but we believe it is directly relevant now as impeachment evidence that he falsely confessed. The only witness that I can get that from is Ms. Romero, because she was in the car with him and is the Spanish speaker.
Okay.
So,
well, Mr. Brown, again, I'm going to tell you where I think we are, and I go back to something that Ms. Freeze said that, again, carries weight with me at this point in time. Ms. Romero was and is your client. You are right that the Freezes were cross-examining her. The issue that you're concerned about, the false confession, did come up. This witness didn't indicated no knowledge of it, so we certainly didn't go down the road very far with that. And I think what I'm leading up to is that I think what you're getting to depends on what evidence, if any, the defense presents in their case in chief. And I think what I'm saying is that you may well be, depending on what they do, set up on rebuttal to address what you're concerned about. And I don't know at this point what else I can do in terms of getting out in front of it in terms of where we are.
I understand what you're saying, but I do believe that the defense has offered evidence through cross-examination of the witness. Whether or not they put a false confession expert on in their case, they may or may not do that. But they've clearly offered evidence through cross-examination that he is sleep deprived, and that they're suggesting with that information that he falsely confessed. That's why I think that they have now made it relevant, and that we should be allowed to be to inquire with regard to what actually happened after they left the sheriff's office.
Okay, I understand your contentions, and again, my ruling is what it is for now, subject to change as we go forward depending on what happens in the case. All right, with that then, are we ready to bring the jury back in?
Yes, I'll go get our witness.
Yes, let's do that. Carrie, you can get the jury and bring Ms. Romero back in. Please be seated, everyone. We're back on the record. We're in the presence of the jury. Mr. Bahena is present along with the attorneys of record. Mr. Romero, I'll remind you, you're still under oath. When we last concluded, the defense had cross-examined the witness, and we're up to Mr. Brown. Do you have any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Good morning, Ms. Romero.
Good morning.
The interaction with the defendant that you had at the sheriff's office, was it ever verbally confrontational?
No, it was not.
Okay. Were you pleasant with the defendant?
Yes, I will say it was a very friendly conversation.
Okay, and you did confront him at times with certain information. Would that be true?
That is correct.
Sorry, my screen flipped back. Now, you were asked a question concerning a hair that you were told was found in the vehicle of the defendant, is that right?
Yes,
You were provided that information from other officers, correct?
that is correct.
Did you ever examine the vehicle?
No, I did not.
Did you ever directly speak to any of the witnesses who examined the Malibu, that vehicle?
No, I did not.
All right. I want to talk to you a bit about the demeanor of the defendant in your interaction with him, okay?
Okay.
The defense spent a fair amount of time asking you whether or not the defendant appeared sleepy to you or sleep deprived. Would you agree?
Yes.
All right. Whenever you interacted with him during the interview, was the defendant able to track your questions?
Yes, Mr. Rivera was able to track the questions.
Was there ever a time during the interview where you asked him a question where he appeared not to follow what you were asking?
No.
Did he ever ask for any clarification on any matter that you remember?
No.
Now, part of the interview that we saw in the room at the sheriff's office, you recall that?
Yes,
The defendant's phone is sitting in front of him, is that right?
that is correct.
Up until 11:30 on August 20th of 2018, did you ever try to prevent the defendant from using his phone?
No, I did
Actu- Sorry.
not. I did not. Sorry.
Actually, we see in the video, would you agree with me, that he does attempt to use his phone on multiple occasions?
Yes.
Objection leading.
Overruled. Go ahead.
What's the answer to that question?
Yes.
At those points where the defendant is seen with his phone, would he have been free to go?
Yes.
You would have allowed him to leave if he wanted to walk out the door.
Yes.
In fact, did you show him, or how did you show him that he could get out of the sheriff's office at Powashik County?
When I was walking back with Mr. Rivera to the interview room, I show physically the exit door with the exit signs, and I told Mr. Rivera that he was free to go at any time. When we went inside the interview room, I even moved the lock to the door to made him aware that it was unlocked, that he could go ahead and leave at any time.
And he never did that, correct?
Correct.
He never left the sheriff's office on his own.
He did not.
He was put into custody shortly after 11:30 on the August 20th of 2018. Is that right?
By the ICE agents, yes.
Okay. Now, I want to just clarify a couple things relating to translation. Tell us again your knowledge of the Spanish language. How would you characterize it?
I was born in Mexico, so that is my first language. That is practically what I used. As a lot of you can tell, I have an accent with my English. Spanish is my primary language.
Okay. So regardless of the transcripts that you've been shown, you were at the interview of the defendant, correct?
Yes.
You engaged with him.
Yes.
All right. Did you have any difficulty understanding his answers to your questions?
No.
Did the defendant ever express to you any difficulty understanding your questions or statements that you made to him in Spanish?
No.
At the outset of the interview, after introductions and some other basic information, was it made clear to the defendant that you were there to talk about the disappearance of Mollie Tibbetts?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. At the outset of the interview, after the initial introductions and conversation, was it clear that you were there to talk about Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes, after the observation.
How would you have made that clear to the defendant?
We again started showing pictures of the surveillance camera that we had, and I laid them down in front of the Mr. Rivera, and he stated, he admitted that that was his vehicle.
Okay, but even prior to that, the name Mollie Tibbetts had been introduced into the interview by you.
Yes, I had a poster flyer of Mollie, the ones that they were putting up around town. I laid it in front of the Mr. Rivera, and he told me that he had seen them around town.
Hang on just 1 second. Ms. Romero, you were asked yesterday a question by Ms. Freeze where she used the phrasing that her client, meaning Mr. Bahena Rivera, led you to the body.
Yes,
And you agreed with that. Is that right?
that is correct.
And by the body, I mean the body of Mollie Tibbetts.
Yes.
Did you have any personal knowledge, Ms. Romero, as to where Mollie Tibbetts was located at the time that you were at the sheriff's office with the defendant?
I did not.
To your knowledge, did anyone in law enforcement have knowledge as to the location of Mollie Tibbetts while you were at the sheriff's office?
Not,
Objection, calling for hearsay and speculation.
Overruled. Go ahead.
not to my knowledge, no.
So no one in law enforcement had communicated the location of Mollie Tibbetts to you?
Correct.
Would you or anyone in law enforcement have knowledge that Mollie Tibbetts would have been found with corn stalks covering her body?
No.
And lastly, Ms. Romero, did you or any other person in law enforcement that would have informed you know that Mollie Tibbetts would have been located in a cornfield in the eastern part of Poweshiek County?
No.
The defendant told you in your interview in the car what with regard to bringing you to that location?
He stated how he made contact with her. He stated that he did not remember how he put her inside the vehicle, but he did remember getting her out of the vehicle, coming to the cornfield, bringing her into the cornfield, dropping her down, and leaving right away, covering her with corn leaves and leaving right away.
And he indicated to you that he brought you there, correct?
Yes.
All right, that's all.
Defense have any recross?
No further recross. Thank you.
Ms. Romero, thank you for being here, and you're excused.
Thank you.
State of Iowa may call its next witness.
Judge, our next witness is Amy Johnson. I need to switch
Okay.
chairs again, if that's okay.
All right. Johnson, I'll swear you in. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Ms. Johnson, you'll be seated right over there, if you would, please.
Ready?
Mr. Brown, when you're ready, you may proceed.
Ms. Johnson, good morning.
Morning.
Okay. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury, state your name, and tell us where you work?
My name is Amy Johnson. I work for the State of Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation Criminalistics Laboratory.
And how long you work for the DCI Crime Lab?
I have been there for 19 years now.
And what are your current duties with the crime lab as it relates to crime scene duty?
I am on call approximately every 6 weeks with the Criminalistics Laboratory, and we are available to be called out anywhere within the state during that time that we're on call to process crime scenes.
Okay. We'll talk just a bit more about what your duties are here in just a second. Do you also have another job at the lab?
Yes, I do.
What is your primary job?
My primary duties are the analysis of evidence to determine if it contains controlled substances.
Okay. Controlled substances have nothing to do with this case, correct?
Correct.
All right. So you're here in your capacity as a crime scene technician, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. How long have you had that assignment at the laboratory to work on a crime scene team?
I began those duties after my regular training in the drug identification section. So approximately August 2002 was my first assignment.
Okay. And do you know, in the whole course of your career since that time, how many different crime scenes you've been asked to go and help analyze?
I would say that I've done at least 50 crime scenes over that period.
And describe for the jury, if you would, how it is that a crime scene team is notified that they are needed.
Typically, we will receive a call from a special agent in charge in the Division of Criminal Investigation, and they will let us know that our response is requested at a crime scene, and they will typically give us an address of where they want us to respond to, and we will go in pairs. So we'll meet up at the laboratory and take a crime scene vehicle and proceed to the scene that we're requested to process.
Okay. And what type of equipment do you utilize, or that is provided to you to process and analyze a particular crime scene?
Typically, we will begin our processing with photography and video of the scene. Depending on what the scene is, we'll do measurements and sketches using, at that time, it would be like a laser distance measure or a measuring wheel.
Could that be repeated for the interpreter? A
Measuring wheel.
Go ahead.
And we are also equipped with alternate light sources, packaging material to collect the evidence, and metal detectors if we're looking for metal in an exterior location typically. We also have screening reagents to test stains for blood. We have latent print kits to search for fingerprints.
It's safe to say you have a lot of equipment that spans many different areas. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So on this particular occasion, were you working as a crime scene technician on this case?
Yes, I did.
All right. I want to direct your attention back to August 20th of 2018. Were you called to Powesheik County in reference to a vehicle that needed to be processed?
Yes, actually, we were told that there were 2 vehicles that were available to be
All right.
processed.
What 2 vehicles were you asked to process?
It was a black Chevy Malibu and I believe it was a tan Nissan Altima.
Okay. And did you proceed then to Powesheik County?
Yes, my partner and I.
Who was your partner at the time?
Jonna Berry.
And you and Ms. Berry, what time did you arrive in Powesheik County?
Approximately 5:15 p.m.
And what location in Powesheik County did you go to?
It was the Sheriff's Office, Sally Port, where the vehicles were maintained.
Sally Port is basically just a garage,
Correct.
and that was at the Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
And what 2 vehicles were both the Altima and the Malibu at the garage?
Yes, they were.
Now, with regard to the Chevy Malibu, was a decision made to transport that vehicle to another location to examine it in more detail?
Yes, it was.
All right. Did you examine the Malibu though at the Sallyport at the Sheriff's Office on the 20th of
Yes.
2018?
Correct.
And then where was it taken after that to be further analyzed and examined?
It was transported to the DCI laboratory garage.
Okay. And what's the purpose of transporting the vehicle to the DCI lab as opposed to doing that further analysis on location in Powesheik County?
And there was a piece of equipment that I was using to try to visualize possible blood stains that was not working properly. So I requested that the vehicle get submitted into our garage so that I could use that instrument on a following day.
All right. And were you able to use that instrument on the following day at the crime lab as it relates to the Malibu?
It was 2 days later, but yes, I was able to utilize that piece of equipment.
Okay. And did it assist you in finding certain areas when they're in the trunk area of the vehicle?
No, it did not.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about your examination of the black Malibu on the 20th of August 2018 at the Sheriff's Office. Okay?
Yes.
What did you do with regard to examining the car, the Malibu?
So we started with taking photographs of the exterior and interior and removing the contents and photographing the contents and logging the contents of the vehicle. And we also, my partner and I, took tape lifts of the interior searching for hair and fibers, and I took samples from some of the stained areas to do presumptive blood testing to determine if they were possibly blood.
Okay, and the areas that you took with regard to presumptive blood stains, were any of them positive?
Not on that day.
Okay. They were following, in your following examination though at the DCI lab, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk about that here in just a second. How long did your examination of the Malibu take while you were at the sheriff's office on the 20th of August 2018?
I would say it could have been up to 3 hours before we finished with that vehicle.
Let's continue on with your examination of the Malibu at the DCI crime lab. What day did that occur?
The examination occurred on the 22nd of August.
Okay. And just to make sure we're clear in the timeline, you also were on the crime scene team that went to the Cornfield to recover what was believed to be the body of Mollie Tibbetts, is that right?
Correct.
That had occurred the day before this particular examination, is that right?
Yes.
So we're taking it a bit out of chronological order, would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, but I want to stick with the car for now, okay?
Yes.
All right. So the Malibu was transported to the lab, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Whenever you, I want to talk in particular about your search of the trunk. Whenever you had the Malibu at the crime lab, were you able to search the trunk of the Malibu?
Yes.
Were you able to access it easily?
Yes.
Okay. How did you access the trunk? Was it? Can you tell us?
I believe we had a set of keys for that vehicle.
Okay. Now, whenever you examined the trunk of the Malibu, were there various things that were in it?
Yes.
Can you describe what those were, please?
Items included in the trunk of the Malibu were a football, a volleyball, a fishing pole in 2 different pieces, a bag of like a fish stringer, some bobbers, some other fishing equipment like weights, some plastic bags, paper.
Okay.
And
That's okay. Various items, would that
yes.
be true? Okay. Did you search any of those areas of the trunk, including the contents, for the presence of human blood?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe, with regard to those items, what items you searched for the presence of blood?
There were stains on several of the items located within the trunk, and the football and 2 pieces of the fishing pole were found to have stained areas that were positive, presumptive for blood. And then several other areas were tested that were negative for blood.
All right. We'll get to the contents here in just a moment. Was there an area of the trunk near the lid of the trunk that you tested for the presence of blood?
Yes.
And exactly where would that have been located?
It was the rubber seal located near the license plate area on the rear of the vehicle.
Okay. I'm going to have you take a look at a few pictures. I think that may help us, okay?
Okay.
First of all, I'm going to show you, assuming it comes up. Can you see the photos on your screen?
Yes.
Exhibit 40 and 41 are on your screen. What are these pictures of?
These are pictures of the black Chevy Malibu while it was located in the Powashik County Sheriff's Office garage.
All right. Is this the same vehicle that you searched at the DCI crime lab on August 22nd of 2018?
Yes, it is.
I'm going to show you what's been previously introduced as Exhibit 43. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
What are we looking at here in Exhibit 43?
This,
Before you answer that, let the interpreter switch. Ready? Tell us what we're looking at here in Exhibit 43.
this is a photograph of the contents of the trunk as we found it at the Powashik County Sheriff's Office.
And whenever it was transported to the lab, were the contents, did they remain in the trunk?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Exhibit 44, what does that show?
This is a photograph showing the area that tested positive presumptive for blood located on the rubber seal above the license plate of the rear of the vehicle.
Okay. The what we see here, I understand the area that's important to you, but this is also the plate of the car, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
All right, it's DKP 055.
Correct.
Would you agree?
Yes.
All right, and the area that you're referring to that tested presumptive for blood, I have the pointer, does that show the area where the blood was found?
It's located above where your pointer is.
Okay. And this part of the trunk, this black, what appears to be a rubber part of the trunk, how would you characterize that?
I feel that that's the seal for when the door is closed to the trunk.
Let's take a closer look at the stain. Exhibit 45. Can you tell us what we're looking at here in Exhibit 45?
This is a closer view of the stain without a scale in it in the photo.
Okay. And the pointer that I have, is it the stain, where is it at in relation to the pointer?
The stain is located directly above the pointer.
And did you put some sort of scale or marker into the photo to give us an idea of size?
Yes, I did.
All right, we'll take a look at State's Exhibit 46. Does that show the scale?
Yes.
And again, the spot that tested presumptive for blood is here to the right of the scale. Would you agree?
Correct.
Ms. Johnson, did you find any other, in your search, at this point in time, any other blood, any other stain that tested presumptive for blood at this time while the car was at the crime lab?
Besides the areas that I've already indicated?
Well, yes. Did you? Yes.
The football and the fishing pole also had presumptive positive areas of blood.
Okay. So how many different stains associated with the trunk, let's just try to be clear, how many different stains total did you find that would have tested presumptive for human blood?
4 that we tested.
Okay. Now, did you collect a sample of those particular areas that tested presumptive for blood?
For the stain in this photo, I took a swab sample of it.
Okay, describe for the jury how it is that you would take a sample of the stain that we see here in State's Exhibit 46.
So I had 2 swabs that I added a distilled water to and used those swabs to take a portion of the sample off of the rubber seal, and then I placed those 2 swabs into a box and sealed it for submission.
All right, so what then happens to that particular swab? What section of the lab would it go to?
The DNA section would get that sample to analyze.
Okay. You have no expertise in DNA analysis, is that correct?
No, I do not.
Do you know Tara Scott?
Yes, I do.
What is her particular expertise at the laboratory?
Her specific expertise is DNA.
Is she also a crime scene technician as well?
Yes, she is.
Okay. Somebody that you work with?
Yes.
The other items that where you would have taken presumptive blood samples, I'm going back to State's Exhibit 43. Some of those are shown here in this picture. Is that right?
Yes.
The balls that you were mentioned before?
Yes.
Okay, and the those would have been submitted to the DNA section at the laboratory also. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. Now, what we also see here in State's Exhibit 43, is there some sort of liner that is in the trunk?
Yes.
And was that liner removed and submitted to the laboratory DNA section for processing?
Yes. All of the fabric covered sections of the trunk liner were removed from the trunk for DNA analysis.
So describe for the jury how the trunk liner was secured in the car, if you recall.
It had plastic fasteners in certain areas, so we dislodged it from the frame of the vehicle by removing those plastic clips and placing each of those pieces in a cardboard box for submission.
Okay. So would those have been submitted to the laboratory once the vehicle had come to the location at the lab for where you examined it?
Yes, they were submitted the following day.
Okay, and to your knowledge, who was the criminalist assigned to analyze those items that were seized from the trunk?
Tara Scott.
And that would include the swab taken from the rubber seal of the trunk as well, is that right?
Yes.
Just to make sure we cover everything, Ms. Johnson, with regard to the trunk that we see here in Exhibit 43, including the other parts of it, the rubber seal, the lid, all of it, was there anything else of significance that you located whenever you examined the vehicle on August 22nd of 2018 that you can recall?
We submitted several other items from the trunk into the latent print section for analysis.
Okay. And do you remember what those items were?
Everything that didn't test positive for presumptive blood.
Okay, that's a good point, actually. Sometimes you have to make a decision at the laboratory as to which section is going to get a hold of evidence first to examine it.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
So, can I just have it read back, please? Oh, that's okay.
Question, that's a good point, actually. Sometimes you have to make a decision at the laboratory as to which section is going to get a hold of evidence first to examine it. Correct? Is that right? Yes.
So it's sometimes an item will get submitted for DNA analysis before it goes to the fingerprint section,
Correct.
and sometimes vice versa. It may go to the other section first.
Yes.
And is there a reason that may be important in a case concerning how a particular item of evidence is analyzed?
Yes, one process may destroy the evidence for the other process to be analyzed.
Okay. So the things that tested presumptive for blood would have gone to DNA first, correct?
Correct.
The other items that would not have tested presumptive for blood would have gone to maybe the fingerprint section, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just to wrap this part of it up, your examination of the vehicle, well, let me back up a bit. Whenever you examined the vehicle at the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office, did you notice the stain that we see here in Exhibit 46?
It wasn't apparent to us at that time. We were searching the interior of the trunk, and I feel that it may have been overlooked.
Okay, so whenever you got to the lab, this particular blood stain that we see in Exhibit 46, that's when you noticed it?
Yes.
At the time that you examined the vehicle on August 20th of 2018, had the body of Mollie Tibbetts been located?
No.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the the day that August 21st of 2018. Were you called back to Poweshiek County on that date on that date?
Yes, I was.
And for what purpose?
Our special agent in charge notified us that there had been a body located, and we were requested to process that scene.
Okay. Did you proceed to a certain location in Poweshiek County?
Yes, we did.
All right, I'm going to put on the screen State's Exhibit 2. There is an arrow on this map, and the label is 2478 460th Avenue. It's indicated as the body location. Does that appear to be the same location that you would have proceeded to in Poweshiek County?
Yes, it is.
All right. Did you go anywhere else prior to going out to 2478 460th Avenue?
Not on that day.
Okay. You went directly there?
Yes.
All right. And what time were you called?
It was in the 6 o'clock hour in the morning.
Okay. What time did you arrive in Poweshiek County at this location that's indicated on Exhibit 2?
Approximately 9 a.m.
Okay. And who else was there?
My partner, Jonna Berry, was with me.
Okay. Were other law enforcement present?
Yes, eventually the state medical examiner and his associates were present.
Okay. Were you shown to a location at this address generally where a body was located?
Yes.
Okay. Did the medical examiner go into that area before you did?
No, I believe we went at the same time.
Okay. So who was the medical examiner that came to the location, do you recall?
Dr. Klein.
Dennis Klein?
Yes.
Who's the state medical examiner, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. At this point, Ms. Johnson, did you begin examining the area in and around the body that was located at that address?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and what, describe for the jury what you would have done initially to search that area.
So upon arrival, my partner and I took photographs and video of the area, including the road leading up to and away from the inlet to the Cornfield. And after the medical examiner arrived, we all proceeded back into the location where we were told the body was.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about the roadway that is adjacent to this particular location. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
All right, I'm going to show you what's State's Exhibit 25. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
On the right side of State's Exhibit 25, this area here to the right, what is that?
That is the inlet to the field where the body is located.
Okay. And this road is 460th, is that correct?
Correct.
And this would appear to be facing to the east. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. State's Exhibit 26, which has already been admitted. This is 2478 460th Avenue. Would you agree with me?
Yes.
And what direction are we facing here?
This is facing west.
All right. And this area here, is that how you gain access to the field?
Yes, it is.
Between these two posts that are photographed?
Correct.
All right. How far, if you remember, from the location of the roadway until you would have entered the corn to find the body that was located?
From the roadway to the body location?
I'm sorry, from the roadway to when you would have entered the corn to find the body?
The roadway to the corn was approximately 430 feet.
Okay, and you measured that?
Yes, we did.
And I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 27. What does this show?
This shows the area in the corn where we entered to locate the body.
Okay, there is what appears to be some sort of yellow tape that is strung on the corn stalks. Would you agree?
Yes.
What is that?
That would be a crime scene barrier tape that was placed in that location prior to our arrival.
What's the purpose of putting that up?
To try to keep people out of the scene, to indicate that that's a secure location.
Okay. Was there anyone else other than law enforcement that was at the location that we see here in Exhibit 27?
Not during the time that I was there.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Other than the medical examiner, correct?
And the county medical examiner was there also.
Okay. And although I don't have a photo of it, if you would turn around and do a 180-degree turn about face and face the road, what would you see?
We would see the grassy area of the inlet.
Okay, so from the roadway to the area that we see on the crime scene tape that's in Exhibit 27, would there have been any corn that would have obstructed your view?
No.
All right, was there a little bit of an incline or a hill between the roadway and the area that we see here in Exhibit 27?
Yes, the roadway was not visible from the corn location, and the area where the crime scene tape is was not visible from the road.
All right, so if you would turn around in this location, could you see the roadway?
No.
Could you see those vehicles that were parked on the roadway?
No.
How would you describe the remoteness of this area that we see here in Exhibit 27?
It was quite remote. There was a house to the east, approximately a half mile, and a house to the west, approximately a half mile.
Okay. Standing here in Exhibit at the area we see in Exhibit 27 on August 21st of 2018, could you see any houses or any other outbuildings from this location?
No.
All right, did you then proceed into the area that we see here in Exhibit 27?
Yes.
All right, generally speaking, where directionally would the body that was presumed to be Mollie Tibbetts, where was that located?
It was approximately 60 feet south of this location, a little bit to the east.
Okay, to make sure we're oriented correctly, this picture in Exhibit 27 is taken to the south, is
Correct.
that right?
Yes.
Okay, so if we're gonna walk us in, okay? Whenever we walk into the corn that we see here, right by the crime scene tape, which way would you go? Left, right, or center? Don't give us directions. If you would go into the corn, how would you proceed to the body location?
To the left and straight.
And it was approximately, say that again, how many feet in was the body that was presumed to be Mollie Tibbetts?
Approximately 60 feet.
All right, we're going to get into some photos that show the body in the corn, but I first want you to describe what you initially saw, okay? So whenever you get into the corn, you locate the body, correct?
Yes.
All right, tell us what you observed whenever you saw this area.
The area was, it had a little bit of a clearing. There were bent over corn stalks covering what is the body. And so the bent over corn area allowed for a little bit of an opening in the corn.
Okay. And was there any particular item of clothing that stood out that identified that area as where Mollie Tibbetts was located?
Yes.
What was that?
Her bright colored running shoes.
You could see those?
Yes.
Right. Was the rest of her body for the most part covered by corn stalks?
Yes, it was.
All right. I'm going to show you a photograph, which is Exhibit 28, which will show this area, okay?
Yep.
What's on the screen now is Exhibit number 28. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Does this area, the area that we see here, was it difficult to photograph without removing the corn stalks?
Yes.
All right. Was it fairly dense in there?
It was very dense.
Okay. And what is this area in the middle of the photo? What does that show?
The pointer is located near the running shoes that we could see.
Okay. And the corn stalks that cover the rest of the body, do we see that here in this area where the pointer is located?
Yes.
Okay. And were you able to clear this area a bit so you could further analyze it?
Yes, we removed the corn stalks away from the body, and we moved away some of the standing corn so that we could process the body.
Okay. So I'm going to show you now what's been introduced and admitted as State's Exhibit 29. What does that picture show us?
This is an alternate view of the body with the corn stalks on it.
And where the cursor is located, is that the bright colored shoes that had first drawn your attention?
Yes.
All right. And although you cleared away corn around this area, had you at this time removed any of the dead corn stalks that were covering what was believed to be Mollie Tibbetts?
No.
Did you take photos from several different angles to give us a better indication of what this looked like?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 30. What are we looking at in State's Exhibit 30?
This is a view of the body with the corn stalks from her feet, showing the view from that location.
Okay. And again, these are her shoes that you see?
Yes.
This would have been from the opposite, this photo's taken from the opposite direction that you entered. Would you agree with me?
I would say yes. This is taken basically facing north.
Okay. And had any of the corn stalks in this photo been removed at the time that you took the photo?
No.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 31. Again, we're just going around the area, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Where my cursor is at, what does that show us?
And those are the running shoes again.
Okay. State's Exhibit 32. What does State's Exhibit 32 show us?
This is the upper body area of the victim in the cornfield with the corn stalks still in place.
Okay, this is a bit of a closer photo, would you agree?
Yes.
All right, this area that we see here that my cursor is on, what does that show?
This is the left hand of the victim,
Okay.
the decedent.
All right, and this, at this time where you see the hand, Had any of the corn stalks been removed at this point?
No.
Okay. All right. Ms. Johnson, did you and the crime scene team remove the corn stalks from the body that you had located there?
Yes, we did.
Okay, and when you did that, were you able to get a better look at what was underneath those corn stalks?
Yes, we were.
Okay. And before we look at a photo of that, can you just describe what you saw after you removed the corn stalks?
The body was located in a face-up position with the head in a generally northern direction, with the arms located at either side of the head, and one leg was outstretched and the other was bent.
Okay. And were there, other than the shoes, did you notice any other articles of clothing?
Yes, there appeared to be a pink sports bra around her upper torso, and black socks.
Other than the shoes?
Correct.
Okay, so no shorts at this location?
No.
No headband?
No.
By the way, did you ever locate a Fitbit or a phone at this location?
No, we did not.
Did you search for one?
Yes, we did.
And you were unsuccessful in finding either of those items?
Correct.
All right, we're going to look at State's Exhibit 33, which shows the body of Mollie Tibbetts. So I'm going to put 33 on the screen. You've described what you saw, but let's orient the jury on this photograph, okay? This area that I have the cursor on, what part of the body is that?
Her head was located adjacent to the cursor.
Okay, sorry, I moved it.
Okay, this is her right arm.
I understand. I'll try not to move it on you again. So this, where the cursor is now, that's her head?
Correct.
Does it appear to be facing the camera?
Yes.
All right, and this area here, what is that article of clothing?
This appears to be a pink sports bra.
Okay, we're going to take a little bit closer look at that. So you can also see her left arm, is that right?
Yes.
That's up above her head?
Correct.
Okay. Now, the area here is Mollie Tibbetts' torso?
Yes.
Correct? And then this area would be where her genitals would be, or between her legs, is that right?
Yes.
That area, does it appear to be more decomposed than the remainder of her body?
It does appear to be decomposed.
Okay. And her legs are, the cursor here, is this her right knee?
Yes, it is.
And here is her left knee, is that right?
Correct.
Are her legs spread apart? Is that what that appears to you?
Yes, they are.
And her shoes that you saw in the corn, is that these colorful shoes here?
Yes.
And I don't mean to be too graphic, but did her feet had appeared to separate from her legs? Or do you know?
I don't recall.
That's fine. Actually, the medical examiner was at that location and recovered the body.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So you didn't have anything to do with that?
No.
Okay. All right. So after viewing the area where Mollie Tibbetts was located, did you also search the area surrounding her in the corn?
Yes, I did.
And did you find any other items of significance?
Yes, I did.
All right. Let's start. I keep grabbing the wrong mouse. Okay. Were you able to locate Mollie Tibbetts' shorts?
I found a pair of black shorts in the cornfield.
I understand. But they were only associated with her because they were near her body that you located, correct?
Correct.
All right. And did you find another article of clothing near where Mollie Tibbetts was located?
Yes, two more items.
All right. What else did you find?
There was a pink band of fabric and a striped, what appears to be underpants, underwear.
Did you diagram this area to give us a better idea of where those items of clothing were located in relation to Mollie Tibbetts?
Yes, I did.
All right. We're going to look at State's Exhibit 24. Okay. The sketch that we see here, who created that?
I did.
Okay, in the middle of the sketch, what does that represent?
This is a drawing of the body position as we found it in the cornfield, showing the bent over corn stalks.
All right, if I might, even though we've got to go back to smaller, this area here, what does that represent on your diagram?
It's indicated as item 4, which was the pink sports bra.
Okay, so this would be her head area? Is that right?
Above that location, yes, that was her head.
The area then that we see on the right that appears to have a number attached to it of 15 feet, do you see that?
Yes.
What is that?
Those are the black shorts located in the cornfield.
And what does the 15 feet represent from where to where?
That was approximately from the location of the body south into the cornfield.
Okay, so just to make sure we're oriented correctly, in order to get to the shorts that you see here in the diagram, you'd have to walk further into the cornfield.
Yes.
Is that right? And as we were facing going into where Mollie Tibbetts was located, it would be more to the left. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. The other item that we see here that is, there's a 24 feet that's represented there. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
What item of clothing was found there?
That was the pink fabric.
What type of pink fabric was that, to your knowledge?
That possibly a headband.
Okay. So that was even further into the corn. Would that be true?
Correct.
Going in the same southerly direction?
Yes, southeastern.
All right. Then moving more on your diagram then to the left, what area, let me point that out, hang on. This area here is what we're going to talk about. We'll take a closer look at it, okay?
Yes.
So the area that I just had pointed to you, what exactly was that you found there?
So item number 8 is indicating the striped fabric that was consistent with underpants.
Okay. By the way, whenever you use an item number, what does that designate for you?
For me, it's just saying what I described it as in the diagram, basically.
Okay, so item 8 is a number you associate with it at the laboratory, correct?
I don't know that it got transferred onto the evidence. It was just for the diagram purposes.
Okay, I understand. And although is there a measurement that you have between where Mollie Tibbetts was located and where this particular item was found?
I found that to be approximately 34 feet to the southwest of her location.
Again, even further into the corn than the other 2 items that you found that we've already discussed. Is that correct?
Correct. Correct.
And what was this item of clothing, if you know?
It appeared to be striped underpants.
Did you take photos of those items?
Yes.
All right, I'm gonna put on the screen we'll talk about the black shorts first, okay?
Yes.
All right, this exhibit, which is Exhibit 34, I have here labeled black shorts, and it's difficult to see them. This is from a distance. Would you agree in Exhibit 34?
Yes.
Did you mark it with some sort of flag?
Yes, we did.
And do we see that red flag here in this corn row?
Yes, that's placed there by us.
Okay, we'll let them switch. And as we approach that area that we see that red flag, is Exhibit 35 show a closer view of that?
Yes.
And what do we see here in Exhibit 35?
This is the pair of black shorts located southeast of the body with a flag indicating.
Same black shorts that we just saw in Exhibit 34, just closer?
Yes.
Okay. And this item here is what you're talking about. It looks like wadded up, dirty black shorts.
Yes.
Okay. Did you collect those?
Yes, we did.
And those would have been submitted back to the laboratory?
Yes.
All right, let's move to the area where you had indicated there was a headband further back in the corn when we looked at the diagram. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you take a photograph of that area as well?
Yes.
Mr. Brown, let me jump in and stop you there. We'll take our lunch recess at this time. Members of the jury, we will be in recess for lunch until 1:15. Before I send you on your way, I want to remind you of your admonition. Please do not be discussing the case with anyone. Make sure you're not doing any type of independent research, and make sure you do not have any type of media exposure to the case. You can leave your notebooks where they are, and again, we'll be back here ready to go at 1:15. Thank you. You have the right impression, and to the extent they have, we'll deal with that immediately. Thank you.